How's it going, guys? Welcome to the Phil Talk Sports Podcast. Hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving. Conference Championship Week is upon us in college football, and me and Nick here are going to talk about it. How was your Thanksgiving, Nick?
It was very good, very good. And for folks that are here, have been with us all year, you guys may be wondering, why is this guy still wearing his Chargers uniform after a 4-7 embarrassing start to the year? And I'll tell you exactly why. We are number one in the NFL in blown fourth quarter leads, baby. We do that better than anybody in the NFL in history. So I support the best team to ever do it.
Hey, you knew going into this year that the Chargers were going to make history. You didn't know what the history was going to be, but you knew it was going to be something. It's probably not what you would have picked, but at least you can say that we are going to talk about the Chargers a little bit later on. But how was Thanksgiving? Any Turkey Bowl action this year?
Not this year. We're actually doing a Turkey Bowl in 2 weeks, believe it or not. So
okay.
It's lasting all month long. But yeah, Thanksgiving was great. As always, you can't go wrong with it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I didn't even usually I hear whispers of a turkey bowl and then I decide if I can make it or not. I didn't even hear. I don't think my neighborhood even did one this year. It was kind of weird. I didn't hear a thing about it. We were pretty busy anyway. I don't know that it would have gotten out there anyway. But to not hear about it, I think was strange. But yeah, I'm sure hope everyone out there had a good Thanksgiving, watched a bunch of football, ate a bunch of food. Record ratings for the NFL games on Thanksgiving. You think they can only go so much higher, but the Cowboys-Commanders game was like the record Thanksgiving game, and that wasn't even a close game. But I think it's just because it was, at the standard dinner time for Thanksgiving or whatever. And then we had our first Black Friday game. Did you happen to catch that one?
Nope, not a second. Not even the highlights. But
so
what is
kind of
what is kind of interesting about the Thanksgiving thing? I've heard rumors about maybe the Lions shouldn't have, that long tradition. It's like every year we got to watch that. But the AT&T Cowboys Stadium does kind of feel like a Thanksgiving atmosphere, like a perfect stadium for that game.
Right. I say give it to them. They've done it long enough. It doesn't actually hurt anybody. Yeah, I have no issue with it. And now a third random game is at the end of the night, the 8 o'clock slot for me, 5 o'clock slot for you. So for the people that are like, oh, we want to see different teams on Thanksgiving, you get to see that now. That third game is, I don't even remember who it was this year, but like I remember one of the first years the Eagles played the Cardinals and we got to wear our black jerseys for that game. But no, keep the Cowboys at 4, keep the Lions at noon, and then whatever that new game
is. Seahawks.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, that I'm cool with it. I get what people are saying, but it's been long enough. And it's funny, the Lions are finally decent, and then they still can't get it done on Thanksgiving.
Yep.
Which I don't know if I told this story or not. So my brother-in-law and sister are diehard Packers fans. They went to Lambeau earlier this year for their 10-year anniversary, and they were at the Lions game in Lambeau where the Lions won. And then, of course, now Thanksgiving rolls around, and I'm sure if they could do something about it, they would switch those results so they could have been there when the Packers won. But I digress.
Yeah, Brian Griffin, Brett, you had it exactly right. Aren't you supposed to be losing in a Thanksgiving game right now? Just incredible, same old lines. But Peyton Manning and Bobby Lane had this weird beer dunk challenge where it kind of reverse jinxes the jinx that they had of I'll take a championship now and curse them for eternity. So, they're trying to do their best to turn around that curse that is the Lions.
Right. So we'll see where that goes. They're still in the thick of things and a little bit more about the NFL later. But this time of year, especially coming off Black Friday, I did watch that game a little bit, but I mostly watch college football. In my head, UCF doesn't play on Black Friday anymore because we don't play USF anymore. But that still makes me think college football. So I mostly watched that. I watched a little bit of the Dolphins game after that. But we are now on to Conference Championship Week for college football, and that's where we're going to start today. Actually, a couple of these games are exactly who you expected to be in these games, and then some are a little out there. Definitely didn't expect some of these people that we're seeing in these games, but there's only a handful of them here. They start on Friday. We're going to get right into the predictions. This one's going to be hard because I'm not going to pretend I've watched a snap of either of these teams. We open Conference Championship Week with the Mac Daddy of them all, and by that, of course, I mean the Conference USA Championship. New Mexico State against number 24 Liberty, and they're actually 12-0, so they're having a hell of a season. They have the statistically easiest schedule in the country this year, Liberty. But hey, if it's that bad, you got to win them all. And so far they have. So it's hard to not go at Liberty on that one.
Yeah, we're just gonna go with Liberty. You know what? We're not gonna act and placate to the fans that we watch these teams. But shout out to Liberty. We'll have an excuse to watch them this weekend.
Yeah, exactly. See if they can pull it out. Hey, if it was easy to go undefeated, everybody would do it. So at one point or another, you still got to get it done. This game, however, this is playoff implications if there ever was one. Oregon and Washington, 12-0 versus 11-1. These two teams met earlier in the year with Washington getting the win at home. This one, of course, this is in Vegas actually for the conference championship game. This might be the hardest one to pick, with the exception maybe the SEC. So where do you see? Do you think Washington can make it 2 straight, or do the Ducks take it?
Well, the theme of conference championship weekend over the years, and for me, has been very rarely does the favorite get upset. I don't know why, but it seems like, especially the top end teams,
Right.
like the rankings that we see going into conference championship weekend, the only reason why it changed is because the team didn't win style points.
Yeah.
It seems like chalk is usually how it goes. I'm tempted to go Oregon, but I'm going to stick with Washington because of that. They have gone through a rigorous schedule, a couple of ranked wins, and obviously, you alluded to the Oregon game. I'll take Washington again, even though usually in college football, a team doesn't beat another twice.
Right.
I'll take them though this time.
Yeah, and this is why I wish, and we've talked about it a million times on this show. I wish to get into the playoff, you had to win your conference championship. Like that was literally your key to get in, because this is basically a playoff game anyway. The way it's set up, so the winner of this is probably going to make the playoff, and the loser definitely isn't. So like this is a perfect example on why if that was the case, you'd have more games like this. This is number 5 versus number 3. If number 5 wins, there's no way they don't get into the top 4 because they just beat the 3rd team in the country. And then if number 3 wins, they're already sitting at number 3, so there's no reason they should go any lower than that. But just for funsies, you picked Washington. I'm going to say Oregon. It really left a bad taste in their mouth to lose to Washington. Nobody cried on the field after losing to Washington. Take notes, USC. But I'm sure they didn't feel great about it. So just for fun, I'll go Oregon on that one. We'll see who prevails there.
Yeah, I'm tempted to go with you too, man. That'll be a lot of fun when we come back.
Okay, so we have the Dr. Pepper Big 12 championship game. Texas is in it, which is not a surprise. And usually when the other side says Oklahoma, it's the Sooners. But this is Oklahoma State at 9-3. They had a pretty great year. They actually got tripped up by UCF late in the year, but still made it into the conference championship game. They have one of the best running backs in the country, and Ollie Gordon, 1,500 yards, 20 touchdowns. But they're playing the Longhorns, who've only lost one game all year. They beat Alabama, I think, win, and they're in or pretty close to it. I think only a few missteps could happen for them to be left out. But a great year by Oklahoma State. And my only reason I'd pick Oklahoma State is this is Texas's last game in the Big 12. And there is a chance that there's going to be some, if the game is close, that the referee, the officiating, a little home cooking, get out of our conference thing, it can happen. It's a real thing. So that's the only reason I would pick Oklahoma State, but I'd be hard-pressed to not think Texas is going to win this.
All right. I'm going to go Texas too. They beat Alabama, of course. They have been as good as almost anybody, even in the playoff picture. So Texas, to me, all around has been very impressive. Oklahoma State's, obviously you mentioned with their running back and just an overall great offense. But I feel hard-pressed to go against a team in the Longhorns that's been great all year long.
And you got to give them some credit, too, because even with the quarterback injury, even with Quentin Ewers out for a couple of games, they still – held close. That one heartbreaker to Oklahoma, of course, is the only blemish on the record. But they would you got to give them credit to even through that would have been enough to crumble a season with their quarterback injury. So for them to still finish 11-1 is extremely commendable. This next one is probably the one that everyone is going to have their eyes on. Number 1 Georgia, number 8 Alabama. These teams did not meet in the regular season, which of course we were talking during the Auburn Bama game this past weekend, which I still can't believe Alabama pulled that one out. I remember saying, because it looked like Auburn was going to win. So I'm like, all right, with Auburn winning this, I then want Bama to beat Georgia just because I wanted the chaos that would come from that. But now that Bama, beat Auburn in the most creative way possible, they just find new ways to beat Auburn in heartbreaking fashion. Bama does, but I know there's this dialogue out there that like Georgia hasn't been tested this year. They've kind of sleptwalked through the year. I think they've just been waiting for this, and it would really wipe away everything they've done this year if they don't win this game. Weirdly enough, they could still get in the playoff. I could see them being number 4 or something. I don't want that situation. Like, if Bama wins, both these teams could still get in, and I think that would ruin this whole playoff scenario. So I'm going Georgia for that reason.
Yeah, Georgia too. Even though Bama's been playing better than where they're at, I think number 8 in the country right now over the last couple of weeks. But that Texas loss and the narrow wins after that, glaring to me, and that incredible miracle to close out the game, the Iron Bowl, was very impressive. But it's hard to get up 2 weeks in a row like they have been. So I see Georgia potentially winning this one relatively convincingly.
Have you seen? So the funniest call about that game was there's like a Japanese call on that final play. Have you heard that?
I didn't see that.
That's yeah. You got. Yeah, I'll send that to you later. That's
was it better than Chris Davis?
I think so for this one because I don't know what he's saying, but he's really hyped about it.
That's awesome. I would like to match him up with the Chargers Spanish announcer. Those are two of the most energetic announcers I think we've got in football right now.
So did you go? I'm sorry, I think I missed it. Did you go with Georgia?
Yeah, Georgia.
Okay, gotcha. Tulane and SMU. SMU with a decent year. 10-2. Tulane number 22nd in the country. 11-1, trying to go to back-to-back New Year's 6 games. I think I have to go with Tulane on this one. They just some of these group. It reminds me of the UCF and other teams like that have dominated the Group of 5 at different times. SMU's good, but they're not at the level that Tulane's been at for the past almost 2 years now. So I think the Green Wave keeps rolling on this one.
Yeah, actually another good throwback to UCF because I believe a couple of years ago, Tulane was either winless or had like 1 or 2 wins. They were the bottom of that league a couple of years ago. So they figured out a way to become not only make the conference championship, but my pick is to win it too.
Yeah, and then it'll be interesting to see what team they could potentially play in whatever New Year's 6 they would get put in at that point. One of the late games for Saturday is Michigan and all of its baggage against Iowa. I don't think anybody wants to pick Michigan these days, but Iowa doesn't score. They haven't scored. I don't know when this started. I'm going to say like 2-3 years ago that they just forgot how to play offense. When they win games, it's like 17-10. 16-13. They played a game in a baseball stadium earlier this year. They played in Wrigley Field against Northwestern. The combined score of that game was not the highest scoring sports event in that stadium that year. And that's football versus baseball.
Wow.
That's how low it was like the 9th highest scoring game in Wrigley that year. And it was the only football game played. So that's how bad they are at scoring offense. And Michigan's damn good. I mean, I'd love to know how much of it is some help in the stands and what it isn't. I don't think they're getting signs anymore. Does Harbaugh get to coach this game or no? No, right?
He does.
He does. Okay. So it was just
I'm almost positive. I hate to be wrong on that, but he's been ruled to coach again.
Right, because I think it was just the 4 remaining regular season games is what happened there. So, all right. So, yeah, I mean, you're probably with me on this with Michigan, right?
Yeah, what's amazing, they had TJ Hawkinson, they had Sam Laporta, 2 NFL tight ends. How are they not able to score points? Obviously, Laporta is not in the team this year, but very, very incredible to see how much they struggle. And I'm pretty sure they were also the team that had that punt return touchdown that got called back because the return man kind of like halfway waved. Now's how they lost one of those. It's like
right, yeah.
Amazing bad luck. And kudos to them for winning their division, but I mean, if Michigan loses this game, that's probably as big of an indictment as everything that's been going on this year. That would be, no offense to Iowa, but that would be a pretty bad loss.
Yeah, if they're able to, because they, like out of the 4 games that, obviously the Ohio State game, everybody thought they might get their comeuppance. I thought Penn State had a good chance and they beat them without even really they only threw the ball 8 times. But that was their first game without Harbaugh, so they probably just simplified their offense as much as they possibly could have and found a way to win that game. So yeah, we'll see on that one. This last one here, I think, is probably the most interesting, and it's Florida State without Jordan Travis against number 14 Louisville. Louisville got tripped up versus Kentucky in the last game of the year. It didn't affect them going to this game, but had they beaten Kentucky, they would be an outside shot to make the playoff as well because they were sitting at 10. They beat Kentucky, they would have been 9 or 8. And then Florida State's at 4. So if you manage to beat Florida State, you're right there in the conversation too. And I know Florida State didn't look overly impressive against Florida without Jordan Travis, but that's one of those rivalry games that you got to throw the records out. That game is that close. Maybe not that close, but the fact that they came back down 12 in the second half with Rodemaker at quarterback. And I think it's really important to note his only significant time at all in his Florida State career was last year against Louisville when Jordan Travis got hurt early in that game, and he lit him up. Granted, these are two different teams from last year, but when I think of him, I think of him lighting up Louisville last year. So I think it's going to be close. And of course, Louisville getting tripped up against Kentucky doesn't make me think too well of them either. So I think I'm still going Florida State on this one.
Yeah, those rivalry games are tricky. I mean, Florida and Florida State, obviously the second greatest rivalry in the state of Florida. We all know what number 1 is. But with that said, I'm probably still going to go Florida State, even down their quarterback. They've got a 4 or 5 star guy in the weights, and it's almost like that game against Florida, getting thrown into the fire and figuring out a way to win that game, I think is going to bode really well the next week because, there's not enough tape on him, but he got that opportunity to, in the line of fire, winning a game like that.
Right.
This should be close. Louisville gets a break with the quarterback down, but I still got Florida State.
And I thought he was maybe a sophomore. I thought, that game against Louisville last year was, him being a freshman. He's actually a junior. So he's been in this system basically as long, as it's been set up this way with Norvell really getting his Mike Norvell getting his system in place. So he knows this playbook. They don't have to simplify everything. I think they did against Florida because that's a team they needed to beat and they needed to do it a certain way. But I think with this extra week of practice, they're not gonna be full strength. And obviously, he's not the runner that Jordan Travis is, so they're gonna be different in that regard. But again, the guy's been there for 3 years, I think. And guess what? Jordan Travis is he's moving on to some level of football next. He's the guy next year unless they bring in some transfer anyway. So he was always going to be your future. The future is just starting a little earlier than you thought. So I mean, I got. And maybe I'm taking too much out of his performance last year against Louisville, but I think they're in good hands. So I think that's going to work out well.
Yeah, or based on my, watching the game, it feels like in the NFL, when you lose your starting quarterback, your offense can go in the tubes. Just ask the Jets.
Yeah.
But in college football, you see either teams bench a quarterback or a quarterback gets hurt. And like Bama's won national championships. There's plenty of, times where a quarterback comes in. Ohio State won a championship on their third string quarterback a couple years ago. I think that was the Zeke Elliott year. But this is not as big of a loss. And Jordan Travis is an NFL caliber guy, but, I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, I agree. Given everything that just went down, if your predictions stick, who is your top 4 going into the college football playoff at that point?
So Georgia, of course, would stay at 1. Michigan would win. I believe Florida State is the 3, or are they the 4?
They're the 4 right now.
They're the 4. And then who's 3?
Washington.
I think it's chalk. I mean, that seems like how it always goes, or usually how it goes. Usually it seems like the top 3 win for sure, and the top 3 were kind of shoe-ins going into this week with the rankings. It's the 4 spot with Florida State that's a little tricky. The only other scenario I see is Florida State struggling to win or losing close against Louisville, and Oregon really impresses against Washington and beats them, with a pretty significant margin, like 10 points, 14 points. To me, that's the only other scenario. And then
Hmm.
Oregon sneaks in at the 4 spot.
Who are
Florida
you
State.
more? Who do you think's more likely to sneak in if Florida State loses, Oregon or Texas with a win? Because I could see Texas sneaking in there as well if Florida State loses.
I hear you, and I would, if I were the committee, I would go that route. But it does feel like on championship weekend, usually whoever they throw in at the 5 spot, that is their way of saying, hey, if one of these 4 lose, this is the team we're going to bring in.
Yeah,
You know, it
because
to
Texas
me,
is all the way back at 7, so I see what you're saying.
yeah,
I just think to lose to the same team twice it'd
yep,
be hard for me to put them in. And I like Oregon. I've never not been a fan of Oregon. It would be difficult for me to put them in at that point. So my 4, assuming Florida State wins, Georgia, Michigan would stay at 2. Washington would go to 3, like you said, and then Florida State at 4. So we have the same general idea. If Oregon wins, they get in as well. And whenever they show the playoff, they always show who 5 and 6 would be or
yeah.
are, like you're saying. I always think, it's no reason to admin this now because this is changing next year to the 12-team playoff, but 5 and 6 should play each other in a New Year's 6.
Yeah.
Like if since they're the best of the rest, like give them and like in this case it could be a Bama Texas rematch, right? It could be there's some good Oregon and I don't know. Let's see who else. Oregon and Louisville or something could be interesting. But yeah, so we basically have the same. We have Georgia, Michigan. We're basically saying the winner of Washington and Oregon.
Yeah.
But we're both so the winner of that we have at 3 because I think Florida State, even if they win, will get punished for their quarterback injury. So even if they win, they're not going higher than 4, and that could be fair. That could be unfair. I think that's what will happen to them.
We've been pissed all the time about, Alabama has the one brutal loss and they didn't really impress a lot this year and they jump up from 5 to 4, even after, a pretty not very convincing win or what have you. But I don't think, as far as I can recall, ever having a situation where a 6 jumps to 4 unless there's mayhem, which we almost never have that.
Right.
So to me, I think it's hard pressed. Anyone below 5, to me, you might as well just get ready for the New Year's 6 bowl. And really, the only reason why 5 has a general shot is because you're playing the 3. So in reality, it's those 5 vying for 4. And unless, to me, the only other situation is if Michigan loses to Iowa. That's the only way that things go crazy. I don't see that happening.
And that would be the most Michigan thing to ever happen. That like
yeah.
That's
Beat
up there
Ohio
with
State.
That's up there with the Appalachian State loss. That would be all the way up there with that. Yeah, so I just want to confirm you're saying there's no chance that if Liberty impresses against New Mexico, they're undefeated. You don't think they're jumping 20 spots to get in there?
19 spots. They'll jump up 19 spots.
So they're going to go from 24 to like 6 is what you're saying.
That's right. That's
fair.
Right.
That's fair. So those are the teams that are hoping to win some hardware this weekend, hoping to go to a bowl game. A team that did neither of that this year is Colorado. And I'm not one to say I told you so, but Colorado finishes at 4-8, which is exactly where I had them. The short is on the YouTube channel. I might even try to, let's see, can I screen share here? Let's see.
All right, John Madden, you can do it.
I got it. All right, you guys ready for this? This was me about 2 months ago. So it remains to be seen. I have them at 4-8, and I think that's very fair. And I think at the absolute ceiling, they go 6-6, and that's if everything bounces their way. So that's what and I think I'm still screen sharing here, right? No, I'm done. Okay, good.
Round of applause, Phil. All right.
When you're right, you're right. Am I right? I mean, that's.
Could you tell me the winning lotto numbers, please?
I'll text them to you later.
My man, appreciate it.
And listen, I'm not super happy that I'm right about that, right? Like we were all to different levels of intensity rooting for Colorado. When they started out 3-0, it's like this is going to be fun. And I mean, Hank, shout out to Hank and his Wildcats, who one of the teams that beat them. They went on a great run this year. I'm sure he, very happy to watch them, and I'm happy for him that Arizona has such a good year like that. But he even mentioned like about 2 weeks once they blew the big lead to who was it, Washington State, I believe. I didn't even know when they were playing anymore. It was no longer like advertised on TV. And the Arizona game, Hank, you said it was on the Big 12 network, which I'm convinced Hank is the only person that has it too. So like,
yeah.
And now there's all these rumors. The quarterback that Dion had, to come in after his son has decommitted. There's rumors that the Suns are going to transfer somewhere. I don't think there's any truth to that, but
yeah.
And now they're moving to the Big 12 too. So there's a little bit more of not a huge, based on the teams they played, but there's a little bit more of an upcharge on as far as the quality of opponent. Where do you think they go from here? Do you think he salvages it? Do you think Dion's even there next year? I know they're like,
oh my goodness.
I think any team he would have gone to in college, it would have been like A&M, and A&M already got their guy. So I don't know where he would jump right now. So I think Dion's there for next year. I just figured I'd throw that out there. But like, do you see an improvement for them next year?
That's crazy that we're even asking this question, because earlier this year he's like, look, I'm not thinking about going to the NFL, because people were already giving him like a half dozen NFL jobs after the 3-0 start. And I was saying, we were all saying like, this isn't an easy process. Like, name me the coach that jumps in and immediately turns him into a winner. It takes a few years, and he got his humble pie this year. A lot of close losses, a lot of questionable late decisions. I remember watching the game against USC where they had the ball down 2 scores with about 4 minutes left, and they acted like there was 10 minutes left in the game. I mean, they were just taking their time getting into the end zone, and by that point, they don't recover the onside kick, and USC runs out the clock. It would have been nice to have some time, and that's just one example of a lot of situations where this team kind of bit off a little more than they could chew this year, like every week getting into the news about how we're motivated. This team said this about us. And granted, some of it is legitimate and some of it is absolutely, beneficial. But to me, I think the way that they ended this year in a whimper like that, losing as much as they did down the stretch, I think it kind of takes a little bit of the luster off. And, it's too early to evaluate next year, but I'm not quite as high on Colorado as I was. I was thinking they'd win 10, 11 games next year, but I'm not so sure about that anymore.
I mean, if you're someone that still wants this to succeed, and I would put myself in that category more than I never wanted them to not succeed. I simply was saying, let's pump the brakes on this year. And of course, they beat TCU, defending runner-up, number 17 in the nation at the time. But they also didn't make a bowl game this year. TCU also had a terrible year. So that's one thing. Really, the Oregon game, everyone kind of expected. They thought they'd brush that off. And it looked like they did brush that off because they played USC. They came back. They almost won. They only lost that by a touchdown. They beat Arizona State. Sorry, Nick. And then 6 straight losses from there. And some of them were close. Or was it – okay, I think it was Stanford that they blew the big lead too. That's the game I was thinking of.
They blew, I think it was 28 or 34.
Yeah, they ended up losing
massive lead.
Ended up losing 46-43 in that when they lose to UCLA when they did play, and we knew this was going to be the heat of their schedule. UCLA, Oregon State, Arizona ended up ranked 2 sets, 3 straight ranked opponents in a row. And then that Utah game, I didn't even know it got played at the end of the year. I think it's important to mention, though, the last 2 games, Shedeur Sanders did not play. He was banged up. They did have a different quarterback in there for what that's worth. Might as well tell the whole story while we're telling the story. But
yeah,
the Sanders brothers have another year left because even if they wanted to, nothing you saw this year is going to make you a viable pro prospect. So you need one more year in this system. And I don't know. I'm comfortable thinking that they're going to win 6 next year. Like that could happen. I don't know what their schedule.
Yeah.
I know that they actually play UCF. I think it's at home. I'm pretty sure it's at home. I got to look at that again. Because they already, once they added all those extra schools, they had to rework the scheduling and everything. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the thing. So maybe next episode or sometime in the offseason when we got nothing else to talk about, we'll look at their schedule going into next year. Because the funniest thing is if they would have not blown that big lead and won one other game, whatever bowl they go to, that would have been the bowl to be at. Like the ratings would have been high. Everybody would have went. Like even college football people wanted them to go to a bowl game, and it just didn't happen. So I don't know. Any closing thoughts on, do you think he was just out-coached, outclassed? You can only have so much cohesion in a team you threw together 2 months before the season. Just where do you think this goes from here?
Injuries played a part of it. This was one of the worst teams in the country the year before he got there.
Right.
A lot of noise, and that is a good thing at times, but I think late in the year, everybody was circling Colorado like we got to beat the team that everybody in the country said this is the team to watch. And they'll be the number 5 team, like Oregon will come to town and everybody's like, I can't wait to watch Colorado when the Ducks have all this history and Colorado doesn't. Right. In the end, I do think Deion Sanders is a really good coach for college football, but there's levels to this. And I think we learned that Deion might not be at the Kirby level, the Saban level, and guys like that.
Right. He's not exactly lining up to replace Saban in a few years yet. We'll see what happens. They are adding Warren Sapp to the coaching staff next year. So see if that helps out the D-line or something else. We'll see how that works. We're going to transition now to some NFL talk. We're going to talk about each of our teams real quick. The Eagles, somehow, some way, finding a way, 10-1. They are 5 games through the 8-game schedule that people have considered the hardest stretch in recent history, the gauntlet. Getting by the Bills in overtime. It was gross. It was sloppy. It was ugly, which is apparently just how we like it to find a way. 2 weeks in a row, coming back down 10 in the second half. I don't know what else there can be said about this. And yes, it'd be great to blow these teams out the way we were last year, but this isn't the BCS. Style points aren't a thing. I'm more confident in this team for these battle-tested victories. Granted, it'd be nice to, later on in the schedule, like I said, we have the 49ers, the Cowboys, and the Seahawks, and that rounds out that 8-game gauntlet that we're 5 games into. But then we end the year with the Giants twice and the Cardinals. So I'm hoping that after we get through that gauntlet, we're finishing the year on such a high note because the level of competition just dips dramatically. Yeah. We're going to see Tommy DeVito twice in 3 weeks, which shout out to him because he's doing decent work over there in New York and a fellow Paisan. But I think the level is just going to be different. But I'm sure you watched this game too against the Bills. What do you make of this 5-game stretch as a non-Eagles fan? So you can't be biased.
Yeah, coming in, we were saying, how about they win 3 out of 5? Or, with the 8-game gauntlet, win 5 out of 8. Just figure out a way to stay alive.
Yeah.
But what's really scary is that with all these wins, they're only 2 games up of the Cowboys. Dallas could head-to-head beat them. And if they lose to San Fran, Philly does this week, all of a sudden, they're right back in it. I hate to give you more PTSD or anything like that, Phil.
Right.
But in general, they get comparison to the I believe 11-0 Steelers of a couple of years ago because of their lack of style points. But this does feel really different because they have legitimate wins, because they have the championship pedigree. But this isn't everything. But the fact that they're not blowing out anybody is something, in my opinion. And I do think in order, even for a team with the championship medal the Eagles have to be successful, they may need like a road bump here or there. And I think Vegas is saying the road bump is this week against San Francisco. So overall, the Eagles, to me, aren't as good as their record says, but they are a team that you got to take seriously in the Super Bowl conversation. They're right there.
I mean, this game, we people on Twitter, they're always bantering like, oh, beating us would be your Super Bowl. When the Niners schedule came out this year, the graphic they made literally had the Eagles circled. This is, in fact, their Super Bowl. And I want to say right now, the 49ers could absolutely beat us. We could absolutely beat them. We've done it before. If they win this week, it does not mean that last year was a fluke. The same way that us
Exactly.
beating the Chiefs didn't change the result of the Super Bowl. We beat the Chiefs 2 weeks ago. Felt good. Felt damn good. It doesn't change the Super Bowl. Just want to get that out there now.
Yeah.
It will not change the NFC Championship either. I'm more concerned about, I forget who it was. There's someone on their team that was talking about like, oh, we're going to go for knees and all this stuff. And I hope crap like that doesn't happen, because I've never disliked the Niners up until last year. Like, they're still talking about the game last year, and they're acting like Brock Purdy, sprained his ankle playing pickup in the driveway. No, dude, he got knocked out of that game. Like, you can't complain that he wasn't there. Protect him more, maybe. Maybe don't let him get drilled 3 plays in a row. And it's not even that. He got his hand he threw a pass and it hit a helmet or something. It was something weird. It wasn't even, your guy was fragile last year. I remember there was talks that he wasn't going to play it all this year. And then week 1 rolls out and there's Brock Purdy. And he's had also a good year. They've had a rough go of it, though. They had a 3-game stretch that they lost, which nobody saw that coming. But yeah, this week could be the toughest one. And again, if you drop that one, it wakes you back up. It keeps you humble. As much as it sucked to lose to the Jets, especially the way they did, I would hate to have the undefeated season narrative on top of all this too. So it's annoying that they lost to the Jets, because they've never lost to the Jets prior to this in the history of football. One of those wild stats that is no longer a thing. So, like you said, if they went 5-3 through this stretch, that'd be considered good. Well, we've already gotten the 5, so you're bound to drop one. And I'm not making excuses. I still think we can beat these guys. I mean, the Niners lost 3 in a row to teams that we could definitely beat too. So I'm not saying if it happens, it's not the end of the world, and it doesn't change what happened last year. The same way when we beat the Chiefs 2 weeks ago doesn't change the Super Bowl. That's my opinion on those.
No, absolutely. I mean, San Francisco is a pretty weak point. As you mentioned, the guy got knocked out. All their quarterbacks got knocked out. And 2, you didn't lose on a last-second field goal.
Right.
I mean, I was busy, trying to figure out my day plans by the second quarter of the NFC Championship game. I actually wound up going to Disneyland that day. That was kind of a cool segue. Nice. So, this is going to be one heck of a matchup, but it's just one of those regular season games where you win this, it's pretty cool, but this is just a preview of what we expect to be another rematch in the conference title.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's now jump over to your team. You mentioned a trip to Disneyland. You have a lot more time to do that when you aren't working, and I think that's something that might happen to Brandon Staley pretty soon here. It's just more of the same, man. It's Groundhog Day. It's literally the dictionary definition of insane is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. The Chargers are literally insane for still having this guy.
Right. How about the Spider-Man meme? Brandon Staley's looking at Anthony Lynn's, looking at Mike McCoy's, looking at Norv Turner. You're the bad coach. You're all the bad coaches.
No, Norv Turner was solid though. I don't know that I appreciate lumping him in with those rest of those guys, but
I mean, he did inherit a pretty good team. I mean,
true, very true.
Antonio Gates just got announced the semifinalist for the Hall of Fame.
Nice.
And Phillip Rivers might join him there in a little bit, but maybe. So, the guy's got to go. The guy's got to go. We've had a lot of bad coaches over the last 15 years. Of the group, I agree with you. Norv is probably the best. I liked Anthony Lynn a little bit too, but yeah, I mean, he's inheriting a ridiculously talented roster. We can have our opinion on whether Kellen Moore would be a good head coach, but we are aware that he's a pretty good not only quarterback of Boise in the NFL, but a solid coordinator. You can do worse than Kellen Moore. Right. Just too many close losses. We say this all the time. My opinion on the Chargers has always been they're not very well coached. But my new opinion on the Chargers, and the reason why I'm pumping my fist that we have the most blown losses in NFL history, is that we're also not a very tough team. I look at Philadelphia and they figure out ways to win. And I'm like, man, I just wish we had a little bit of that toughness. And it seems like, Brandon Staley's the problem. But Philadelphia's kind of been like that for a while. There's something about building a culture, bringing in guys that kind of carry a tradition. To me, it's like, by this point, we've had such expectations of losing for so long that a coach is going to help, but we just need a whole reboot of this franchise. Are we going to get it? considering the guys that own the team and everything, I have my doubts. But we, Brandon Staley is just the tip of the iceberg.
I mean, you mentioned the toughness, and I mean, at some point, because it's happened with Andy Reid, Peterson, Chip Kelly, less so, but there were still guys on that team like that. I think being in LA doesn't help. I don't think anyone's ever took like LA and said the words like hard nose and hard
Yeah.
working and gritty, and like those are not two things that typically go together. So I think that's part of it. And then you're a secondhand citizen in LA at that, which is never fun. Granted, that's calmed down a little bit because the Rams aren't as good, and like people still like seeing Justin Herbert and all that stuff. So this has got to be one of those situations that they're just waiting until the end of the year to fire him. They don't want to deal with the interim crap. That's got to be it, right? There's no way this guy is here next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but there's rumors, and those rumors are just the herd. I forget who Colin brought on his show, but he was saying they did not even consider Sean Payton for the head coaching job there. Like, I got to take it out with a grain of salt. We don't know for sure, but
Right.
I mean, he was slutting himself out on those front row seats at all those Charger games. So you had to believe he wasn't just doing that because he liked watching it, or he's related to a Harbaugh. So this is just a team that over the years just constantly seems to go cheap on coach and just does not, bring in culture guys that create winning. We need a reboot, man. But to be honest, I'm not entirely sure that the Chargers are going to get this coaching staff right this coming offseason. I hope they do, but I got a gut feeling they'll bring in another young guy on a cheap contract.
Well, you mentioned, rumors and the herd. I don't know if the herd ever talked about this, but one of those rumors, do you on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you believe any of these Bill Belichick rumors?
What rumors are we talking
Just
about?
that they'll make a trade because Belichick.
Oh, Chargers to get Bill Belichick. I was thinking, did he did he do something nefarious?
Right.
I don't think that's going to happen.
No.
I don't think so. And actually, to be quite honest, I'm not entirely sure if I was them, I'd do it either. I mean, I like Bill Belichick's an all-time great coach, top 3, top 5, wherever you want to put him. But I mean, by this stage, considering the disaster that is the Patriots, I think that's not just Brady left. We've had bad luck with draft picks.
Right.
I think Belichick's lost some of his fastball, especially on offense.
Do you think he's in New England next year?
But I think he's just going to be somewhere else.
Okay. But you don't think he'll be in New England next year?
No, I think he won't be with the Chargers or the Patriots.
Gotcha. Any other? I mean, I've heard Washington. So I'm hearing more and more weird stories about the Panthers' new owner because he's like a business, like crypto, buy a stock, sell it the same day. Like he's like ADD with his business, and he's trying to run a football team the same way, which is why it's he's fired 2 coaches mid-year in 2 straight years. That doesn't happen. So it's like, is that guy going to be like, screw it, who's the best coach ever? And he's going to type that into Google, and like Bill Belichick's going to come up. It's like, go get me that guy. So like, I don't know why Bill would want to go to Carolina, but like that's a weird thing that could happen, I guess.
Well, you started your save your receipts a couple of months ago with the Colorado bit that they'll be 4-8. I'm not having a crazy amount of conviction, but I got this gut feeling. End of the year, Belichick and Kraft mutually agree to part ways. And then after about a year, Belichick will announce his retirement. And I think this is the last year we see Bill Belichick. I don't have a whole lot of confidence in that, but I have a little sneaky suspicion that this is it. Because, I mean, the guy's going to be like 74 or something.
Yeah. Well, from your mouth to God's ears, we'll see if that's correct. I would not mind a world that Belichick is no longer a football world. I'm not asking any ill will on the guy, but is no longer part of it. So if you do get that right, we'll clip it just like we did my Colorado 4-8 thing. So I got you covered there. On our way out here, this is kind of late breaking news. This was like later in the workday I saw this. Deshaun Jackson officially announced his retirement today. One of the greatest Eagles of all time. One of my favorite Eagles of all time. It's when I think of Deshaun Jackson, I think of it was the first time in my younger football career because as a fan, like when when I started watching, like McNabb got drafted, like Westbrook was already there and Dawkins and like those guys are already there. Deshaun was the first guy that I remember like the very start of his career. I remember like we drafted this guy and he immediately made an impact. And, he jumped around. Obviously, Chip Kelly, traded or released him when he shouldn't have because he believed a story that was bullshit, that he was dealing with gang members or whatever. Yeah. And it's like the guys from Cali, he probably just knows these guys. And, he made his mark known in other places. I remember I was at an Eagles-Bucks game, the Ryan Fitzmagic game, when he wore Deshaun's like stuff after the game. He burned us as a member of the Buccaneers, and we even played for Washington for a little bit. But I think he'll always be remembered as an Eagle. So as we close it out today, I just want to shout out D-Jack, 15 years in the league, and I think one of the greatest Eagles of all time.
Yeah, the Miracle at the Meadowlands is my favorite play. I mean, the Herman Edwards is cool, but the Deshaun Jackson return was amazing. Don't punt it to that guy, and Dodge did, and that was the end of it.
One of the few times for Miracle of the Meadowlands that the sequel may have actually been better than the original. So shout out to D-Jack. Nick, I want to thank you for taking some time out of this to talk some football with us today. Everyone for listening, thank you for that. And enjoy Conference Championship Week and the NFL this weekend. So we'll see you next time. Take care.